It was the first chapter of the novel, Game of Thrones. Not the prologue, which actually appears first, I wrote that later. But it was the chapter where the Bran viewpoint, in which they ride out to see the deserter of the Night's Watch beheaded, and they find the direwolf pups in the summer snow. That was a quote from a Vanity Fair article from George R. Martin himself, and he mentions how the very first thing he ever wrote for Game of Thrones in the Game of Thrones universe, now he was actually writing another book, mind you, but the very first thing he wrote was from Bran's viewpoint. The very first scene we get is where Bran is walking through the woods with Ned Stark. This is obviously before he loses the ability to walk, and this is a scene that happens on the show. It's where they find the direwolves. This was the first moment that came to George, and he talks about it in multiple interviews about how it sort of just all flowed from his soul. He literally wrote the entire story based on that one scene, and that leads me and many others to believe that Bran is the key to this story. Everything will end and begin with Bran Stark. Now, before we get started, if you could please do me a massive favor and slap a like on this video, as the like goal is going to be 420. Also, make sure you're subscribed, and this is the most important part. Make sure you have your notifications turned on, so that way you'll get alerted every single time I drop a video throughout this long night. And a super special thank you to Brick23, Bloody Tyrant, Leah Hendrickson, Angie Delehanty, Nancy Tockstein, Marilyn Miller, Fred Wicks, BEL-a-Donna, Cater Tot, Joe Swag, and Damon Mayo. They are all members of my Patreon family over on patreon.com/reviews. And if you all watching are interested in joining, check out one of the links that's popped off during this video or the link down below in the description. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I, along with many others, strongly believe, whether you want to debate me or not, let me know down in the comment section, but this whole story has to revolve around Bran. I mean, if his character alone was strong enough to bring into prophecy A Song of Ice and Fire, and George is, like I said, focused on something else, a completely other project, a sci-fi novel, for this to just come to him one day, Bran has to either be one of the surviving characters at the end, or even sit the Iron Throne itself, or maybe even perhaps a new throne, one that would rule them all. There are many thrones in A Song of Ice and Fire, and Bran has strong connections to the old gods through being a grain seer, but also through the power of ruling in the north through his actual bloodline. Now, to be fair, it's hard to say that one character is quintessential to this story. In writing these novels, there are so many events happening simultaneously, and it's not just a straightforward story. We're reading from multiple characters' points of views, and some of them are far on opposite sides of the world. It's not fair to really just say, okay, Bran's the key player in this story. I guess it's more fair to say that Bran will play an essential role in the outcome of the story. Whether he's alive or dead, I think Bran's journey through Winds of Winter and then eventually A Dream of Spring will likely be one of the greatest out of all the POV characters. Now, since there are so many different sides of the story, or so many different key players, you could argue that there are multiple individuals in the main storyline, not so much in the TV show since that's off, but in the main storyline of the novels that could play the role of Ice and Fire. Most people automatically jump to Jon Snow being ice, Daenerys being fire. We all know that ice preserves and fire destroys. And you could even argue even further that more symbolism, or something that is more fitting to the symbolism of Ice and Fire, could be the dragons themselves being fire incarnate, and then the White Walkers, who are starting to make more of a presence in the books. Now, before I say this next part, please do me a favor yet again and take a little bit of grain of salt and swallow it for the next part, and also throw your tinfoil caps on the dome, because it's about to get a little bit weird. Okay, fire destroys, ice preserves. Bran in this theory is ice. Jon Snow is eliminated as ice because as of right now he's dead, and even if he does come back as a white, those characters, at least proven history, have yet to really get POVs, mainly obviously being Lady Stoneheart. She hasn't had another POV chapter since her untimely demise. If this is a case, then in Winds of Winter, Jon Snow could play more of, I guess, a backseat role when Daenerys finally arrives to Westeros. If this is the case, then Bran and all of his knowledge that he's gaining in the north from someone who is Ice and Fire incarnate. I mean, the old man under the tree is Brynden Rivers. We're going by the novels here, and he is a Targaryen who was sent north of the Wall for some shit that happened earlier on in something that was known as the Blackfire Rebellions, and during a time frame in which Brynden Rivers was actually escorted to the Wall by Sir Duncan the Tall. So this was during the Hedge Knight series, or Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. He's been in this cave surrounded by weirwood roots for something like 100 years, and I think that's a lot more significant and important in the books. if Bran is being taught by fire how to be more like ice, maybe Brynden Rivers is a combination of the two of them, and maybe Bran's ending or what he does in this next couple of books has to do something like that. For a long time, a lot of people, or several people on the internet, have theorized that the others, the Great Other, and Weirwood Paste that Bran consumes while in the Cave of the Three-Eyed Raven that actually enhances his power. So a lot of people think that all of those things that are going on with Bran north of the Wall have a bit of a nefarious nature to them. We do know that the Night's King and the Great Other and the Army of the Dead haven't had nowhere near strong of a presence in the books yet that they have on the television show, but that's what's going to be worked up towards, and if not at the very end of a Winds of Winter, we could likely see the beginning of it at the end of Winds, but most likely it's going to go down in A Dream for Spring. If Bran is being taught how to preserve everything, being taught about the past in order to preserve it for the future, perhaps Bran and his tutelage with Bloodraven is actually his training in order to become the king. Someone who is being taught their entire life by everyone, and their first scene is actually being taught by his father sort of how to take his place, and if the events were to happen in order to force him to do so. If his whole journey has been about that, Bran theoretically is the best king for Westeros. Now, what I think most people don't like is how that happened on the TV show. But back to what I was saying about sort of the nefarious nature of Bloodraven himself and the others, and how he tells Bran he'll be able to fly, and how he drinks this mysterious thing called Weirwood Paste. Well, when Bran's drinking it, everything's torchlit, there were no lights back then. Bran actually thinks that it resembles the color of blood, and while he's drinking it, he chews on something, or there's like a vein in it. And the fact that every single form of magic in A Song of Ice and Fire seems to be linked to blood sacrifice, and in the original form of it being blood magic, and there's like, they're in a cave surrounded by a floor of bones. A lot of people have put two and two together, and as soon as they arrive at the cave, sorry for getting sidetracked so much, but as soon as they arrive at the cave, Jojen actually becomes like extremely depressed and starts longing for home. Like, he basically realizes that he has to go back, at least he thinks according to his dreams, that he has to go back to Greywater Watch in order to die. A lot of people think that the paste that Bran is fed that enhances his powers is actually Jojen. Now, if that theory were true, well, that's actually contradictory, because Jojen says multiple times in the books that his dreams always come true. If that's the case, well, then he will actually die at Greywater Watch, and maybe he lives long enough to make it back there. What I'm proposing is that maybe this Jojen paste, or this Weirwood paste, is actually part of Bloodraven himself. Now, it could be a mixture of things, because when Bran tastes it, he gets like bitter, then sweet, then like he longs for it, and then it reminds him of kissing his mother the last time his mother kissed him. So there's definitely some drugs, maybe even some psychedelics involved in this, but we gotta remember one thing too. Before the gang actually makes it to Bloodraven's cave, they're wandering through the haunted forest on their way, and they nearly starve to death. There's a time where their companion, Cold Hands, who's basically the one leading them through the haunted forest, actually leaves and goes off to kill some Night's Watch members. Bran follows him when he works in the summer, and Bran actually feasts on a few of the bodies, hoping that since he's eating flesh through summer, that would be enough to satiate him. Well, when Cold Hands returns, he has some meat that he refers to as pork. And I should clarify that Cold Hands is suspected to be a member of the Night's Watch, so he wasn't just killing Night's Watch members for no reason. They were supposed to be deserters. And when he saves Sam not long before that, he actually refers to Sam as brother, and he's sort of dressed in traditional garbs of the Night's Watch. Now, that little excerpt by itself isn't really important, but when you take into the fact that whatever the paste that he's consuming definitely has some sort of human flesh in it, whether it's Jojen's or Bloodraven himself, maybe the process for Bran to transform into who he wants to, or who he's supposed to become, is something that's going to require a lot of sacrificing. Maybe he will actually have to consume parts of Bloodraven in order to become Bloodraven. And in becoming Bloodraven, if we're to look at the original outline of what the TV show sort of did, where Bran actually becomes Bloodraven, if that's the case, well then maybe when Bran consumes him and actually takes on the role of the next Great Green Seer, Bran will be given the ability to control dragons through his war abilities, because he has consumed the blood of a Targaryen, which we know blood sacrifice, blood magic is everything. So maybe the whole time that Bran's being told he'll learn to fly and he'll be taught to fly is by actually consuming the blood of Brynden Rivers and being able to control dragons through that. And I guess the whole point of what I'm getting at in mentioning that ice preserves, fire destroys, Bran being able to control dragons, maybe once Daenerys actually lands in Westeros, the story would eventually go on a route which would involve Bran using his warg abilities to control a dragon and destroy most, if not all, of the Army of the Dead. And with George R. Martin being famous for killing main characters left and right, maybe Daenerys does eventually lose her life in Westeros in the pursuit What the fuck is Westeros? Maybe Daenerys does lose her life in the pursuit of the Iron Throne when she arrives to Westeros, and Bran eventually ends up sitting the Iron Throne. He would be elected as the one who doesn't necessarily want the throne, but would be the most right and the most fitting for it. And maybe he could even rule from the north. Alright, I'm gonna get out of here. I don't want to take up too much of y'all's time. You all let me know what you think down below in the comment section. I mean, there is a lot more to be discussed about Bran and how the original showrunners kind of thought of him to be, at least when they were telling us about it, when he came back, he would be like the Luke Skywalker to sort of save everything. And the fact that they kind of just didn't really give us that drawn out journey, Bran didn't really have that many impactful moments in season 8, and he sort of just gets to sit the Iron Throne. That's what made me think that they had to do that, because that's what's going to happen in George's books, and they just didn't know what journey was involved in order for Bran to get there. They just knew the final destination, which we knew that George has told Dan and Dave what are the rough notes of what the ending will be. I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on this. The like goal is going to be 420. Also, make sure you're subscribed and every notification's turned on, so that way you'll get alerted every single time I drop a video throughout this long night. Super special shout out to every single watching this video, and a super special shout out to every single person on my Patreon family over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews. I want to thank you all again so much for watching. My name is Mark, and this has been Sir Hunts.